Well, good morning, good afternoon to all of you today. There are hordes joining today. It is very, very exciting. My name is Jesse. I'm here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, and I know a lot of you are new to this. A lot of you are old timers as well that have come to many broadcasts this year. But if you are new to us, we're all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now, you're catching us in a really exciting day. In fact, your teachers all already know this because there's over 400 of you today from California to Newfoundland. So we are literally like crossing this epic continent with classrooms. A big welcome into each and every single one of you. Now, I want to note before we dive into today's topic and why you're all so excited, we are going to have a Kahoot today. So between our talk and our Q&A, if you want to pull up that game pin for a little 4-question action in between, please do. In about 25 minutes, we'll be getting to that. But the reason you're all so excited, the reason I'm so excited is that we get to join live today to talk about chasing dinosaurs, digging up fossils of the most awesome time in the history of the world with the ancient, amazing animals that used to occupy this planet. And there's no better guide for that than Dr. Victoria Arbour. She's been joining me in program for years now. It's always such a thrill to have someone on whose zest for her work is equal to mine and extends beyond what most of us will ever get to do in their lives. So I'm so thrilled to welcome in Victoria, who's going to take us on a little bit of a journey today. Without further ado, I'm going to zip my lip. Victoria, thank you so much for joining from the Royal BC Museum today, and tell us a little about what you do.
Yeah, so I am the curator of paleontology here at the museum, and that means that my job is to be a scientist and a researcher. And what I study are dinosaurs, especially. So I look at the fossils we have in the collection. I go out and I try to find more dinosaurs in British Columbia, which is not always super easy, as you're going to learn about today. And then I help look after those fossils here in the collection.
Fantastic. Well,
and so today I am going to share a presentation. I'm going to get my thing started. You'll have to bear with me here for a moment as I get everything going. Let's bring up.
While you're doing that too, I'll just highlight Royal BC Museum. You can check out way more after this broadcast is done. I'm going to pass along all sorts of cool dinosaur resources when we finish today. So keep the learning going on some dino action when we are done. But yes, I know you've got a lot to share, so I'll let you pull that up and take us away.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Beautiful.
All right. So we're going to be chasing and discovering dinosaurs in BC today. I work at the Royal BC Museum. It's located on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, which are now known as the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. And I am very appreciative for the opportunity to live and learn on this territory. I am from Nova Scotia originally, so I'm a newcomer to BC, relatively speaking. And it's a really, really great place to live and work. So where is this? Because I know we've got people from all over North America joining us today. I live on an island. I live on Vancouver Island in the province of British Columbia. That's circled in green here. And if we zoom in on where we are, here's British Columbia and here's Vancouver Island. And I live right down here at the southern tip of Vancouver Island at this beautiful museum called the Royal British Columbia Museum. And it's a really fun place to work. And in addition to living in Lekwungen territory, I am talking about fossils that are found on the traditional territories of the Tahltan First Nation, which is located further north in the province. So let's get into it. So I just showed you where I live and work in British Columbia down on Vancouver Island. But where I do my field work, where I go and look for dinosaur bones in the province, is way up north. British Columbia is a huge province. It takes us a really long time to get up there. We usually have to fly halfway there and then drive another 8 or 10 hours to get up to the place that we want to go visit. And this is an area called the Spatsizi Plateau, and it's in Spatsizi Plateau Wilderness Provincial Park. Spatsizi Plateau is a really special place because it's one of the few places in British Columbia where we can get dinosaur bones. It's up in the mountains today, and it was also up in the mountains during dinosaur time. So most of the dinosaurs that we know about from this particular time period actually lived along ancient coastlines, even though it's now hot, dry deserts today. But the dinosaurs up here were living in the mountains with mountains to the east and the west, and then living in these mountain valleys. So it's a really, really different place to go visit and look for dinosaur bones. The reason that I go to this particular spot really far away from where I live is because back in 2013, before I even started working at the museum, my colleague Ken Marr found a tyrannosaur tooth. So this little gray-blue fossil here is a tooth from a tyrannosaur dinosaur, not necessarily T-Rex, but it could be a close relative. We know it's a tyrannosaur based on the shape of these serrations or denticles that are inside or along the cutting edge of the tooth. And each meat-eating dinosaur has different shaped denticles, so we can see what kind of dinosaur it was just by looking at a tooth, which is really exciting. And this tooth was found up in this provincial park. And the provincial park has rocks of the same type, the same group of rocks, compared to some fossils that I had been working on a little bit further south near the town of Smithers in BC. So I was really excited because I knew that there should be dinosaurs in these rocks. And then Ken and his team found that there are dinosaurs. So I knew as soon as I started working here that I wanted to go and collect as many fossils as I could and try to learn more about dinosaurs from this area of BC. So I've been to Spatsizi Plateau a couple of times now. I went in 2019 and in 2022. We were going to go last year, except that there was a huge wildfire, so we had to cancel 5 days beforehand. So the last time we went was in July of 2024, this July that we just had. And I went with a really great team of people with some funding from an organization called the Trebek Initiative, and also from BC Parks and from NSERC, which is a Canadian science funding agency. And so we took 6 people, myself, behind me is Derek Larson, my friend and colleague, who is the collections manager for paleontology at the museum here. So he helps keep the collection organized and usable. Our friend Tom Cullen, who's in the back, is a paleontologist in the United States in Alabama. And then we've got Emily Cross, Brady McBride, and Teague Dixon, who are 3 of my students that were coming along and doing a great job helping us find fossils in this very challenging environment. So how do we get to Spatsizi Plateau? There are no roads in the entire provincial park. So there's no roads, there's no campsites. The only way to get in and out is by air. There's a couple of fishing and hunting lodges where you can get in by float plane, but we're up in the mountains, up above the trees. And so we get there by helicopter, by a big beefy helicopter called an A-Star. It takes about an hour to fly us in, so it's way out there. This is the helicopter picking us up at the very end. It's very exciting to have it land right next to you like that. And we're all kind of like keeping our heads down as it blows the mosquitoes away from us. And so it's a really interesting place to go visit because we have to bring everything with us in 1 or 2 helicopter trips. And so it's a very different environment from anywhere I've worked before. Most of the places I went to look for dinosaurs previously was in places like Alberta and Montana, where I hiked around in hot, dry badlands. But this area is actually a little bit more like the Arctic or the tundra. We're not quite in the Arctic, but because we're up high on these plateaus, it really feels a lot like tundra. The ground is full of these lichens and mosses, and it's very spongy to walk on when we're not on the rocks. There are caribou and wolves, so it's really neat to like wake up and see caribou outside your tent, because even though I live in Canada, I don't get to see caribou usually, so that's really cool for me. And we basically live in tents while we're out there. We camp out there for about 10 days. We have to take everything with us that we want, and we have to take everything out at the end so we don't leave any mess behind in this protected area. So we each sleep in a little tent, and then we have 2 tents where we keep our supplies and our food so that we don't have food smells in our tents to attract animals. So that's what Brady and Tom are doing. They're having some breakfast there in the morning. We basically have to bring in dehydrated bags of food, and we add hot boiled water to it, and it fluffs up and becomes something much more edible. And then for lunch, we have things like granola bars and pepperonis and cheese and stuff like that. And like I said, everything that we need has to come in with us on those helicopters. So it's very fun trying to pack and get organized for a trip like that. So you probably saw that it was quite green and grassy looking when the helicopter was flying in. And that's where we put our tents, sort of in the little valley underneath the summit of the mountain that we're camping under. But what we're really interested in is the rocks, because that's where you get the fossils. So most of our time is spent along these boulder cliffs, full of these huge, huge boulders. And we basically hike around very, very carefully, very slowly, trying not to like hurt our ankles or break our legs or anything. And excuse me. And then we look to see if we can find fossils. And we actually find a lot of fossils in this very remote, inhospitable environment. Brady is a really good finder. He's found a lot of the fossils that we've collected and brought back to the museum. Here he is pointing at a white, big sort of square bone. That's probably a leg bone from some sort of large dinosaur. And the bones are found in these big, big boulders. We can't collect every single one because they're too heavy to put in our backpacks. So what we do is we usually spend some time hiking around and figuring out which are the best ones for us to spend our time collecting. We take a photo of everything that we find. The little yellow tool that you see in this photo to the right is my GPS unit. So that shows us where the location is and how high up we are, and we record all of that information for every bone we find. So along these hills, we found over 100 bones, and we didn't bring back all 100 of those bones, but we found a lot. They're found in these big boulders that have all these pebbles and cobbles inside them. This is a type of rock called conglomerate, which is a really weird rock to find fossils in, because usually it represents an environment that's really high energy and would break bones apart. So we find that really weird and interesting, and it's something we're going to study more. Here's some more examples of the types of bones that we find in these big boulders. This one on the left is a backbone from some kind of dinosaur that we have to figure out still. The circle in the middle that you're seeing is where the spinal cord, your nerve cord, would go through the back. And then at the top are the bumps and processes that your muscles attach to. And if you feel your own back and you feel the bumps, that's what you would feel on your back. So that's a really cool one. That's one that we brought back to the museum that we were really excited about. And Teague here is pointing at a series of little rib bones that are sticking out of a rock, all in a sequence, all evenly arranged. So that means that there's probably part of an articulated rib cage or backbone sticking out of that rock, which we were really excited about. That boulder is so big, we weren't able to really excavate or look at it further, but it's really cool to know that there's stuff like that preserved up there that we might be able to find a little bit more accessibly in the future. So that was a great find. So this is an example of what we have to do when we find the fossils and we want to collect them. The very first step is to actually put a special glue or consolidant onto them. So this is actually the hip bones of a dinosaur that Emily in the purple jacket found. And Brady next to her is putting some of this glue on. The glue is basically a series of little plastic beads that are dissolved in acetone or nail polish remover. And we're dripping that on, and the acetone evaporates and leaves the plastic behind to kind of soak in and cover up the bones to keep any little pieces from flaking off as we start to bump it around a lot more as we bring it to the museum. So that's a first step in getting the fossils ready to bring back. The next step is to cut them out of the rocks. So that is a really exciting job where we have to use a really, really big tool called a rock saw or a concrete cutter. This is a really dangerous tool, so we have to be really careful while we're using it and use a lot of safety precautions because we're really far away from any doctors or hospitals. So safety is really important to us. So Derek here is using a rock saw. He's wearing ear muffs to protect his ears because it's really loud. We wear a dust mask so we don't breathe in a whole bunch of rock dust. And then we wear safety glasses and a face mask. So if any chips come up, they don't hit us. And then of course we have to make sure that our feet are far away from the blade while it's spinning. Here's an example of, ooh, that's really loud. We're gonna mute that and let it play. This is my friend Tom using the rock saw. So you can see it makes a lot of dust. You can see the blade spinning there. And basically what we do is we let it spin and spin and spin. And we push it gently into the rock and make these long, deep cuts in two different directions. So we make almost like a grid pattern away from the fossil. That lets us use some tools like hammers and chisels to break apart those grids and basically break little cubes and squares of rock off of it. In places like Alberta and Montana, we're usually able to just use hammers and chisels and even smaller tools like awls or dental picks because the rocks are a bit softer. But the rocks here are super, super hard. So we actually can't just use our arm muscles. We have to use the rock saw to basically cut these lines in and help us break the rock apart. So you can see Emily is working really hard here. She's using a 3-pound crack hammer, so a really big, heavy hammer and a big, heavy chisel. And we're very carefully using those lines. You can see some deep lines that have been cut in on the side. And this can take a really, really long time. It can take several hours. One of the fossils we collected took an entire day basically to get it cut out of the rock this way. So it's really, really slow, which is why we can't collect every single fossil that we find up there. But it's very fun, and we all just have to work together. We usually have one person who does the rock sawing because that's pretty hard, and another person or people come in and do some chiseling, and then that way we can take breaks and enjoy the scenery for a little bit while we're resting. For some of the fossils, what we also do is wrap them up in plaster bandages. Sometimes we do this before we start cutting, and sometimes we do it after we've made the block small enough to bring back to our camp, like we're doing here. And so what we call this jacketing. It doesn't really look like a winter coat or a jacket, but we call it a plaster jacket. And it's basically something that will keep the fossil protected as we carry it in the backpacks and our helicopter and all the way back to the museum in our trucks and shipping it. So what we do is we put some wet paper towel down first so that the plaster won't stick right to the bones and the fossils. And then we use these medical bandages. So if any of you have ever unfortunately had a broken arm or leg, you probably had these exact same things put onto you. These are called gypsonas or medical bandages. They have gauze with plaster, dry plaster on them. We pour some water onto the plaster and that activates it. And then we can start wrapping up the fossil just like a broken bone. It's exactly the same idea. So here Teague has the wet gypsona. It gets really, really messy very quickly. And they are going to wrap the fossil up. They basically sort of smooth it over top. Reedy's going to help smooth it out while Teague helps wrap it all over. And we basically just wrap it back and forth and around the fossil until it's all covered up in a couple of layers to keep it nice and safe. And then after a few hours, that plaster will, instead of being wet, it'll be dry and hard. And then it's this nice little container for keeping the fossil safe. So you can see Teague just working back and forth, going to make kind of like a zigzag pattern. Because the weather was really nice this year, you might notice that there's a lot of bugs flying around us. And so those are just insane swarms of mosquitoes that bothered us pretty much every day for the entire time we were there. So that is another interesting challenge about working up in these areas like this. There's not a lot of animals for the mosquitoes to eat, so they really, really like us while we're there. But they're very annoying. And then the fossils have to make it back to camp. And so this is the biggest one that we collected. We think this was probably about 150 pounds. This is the big one that took a really long time to get all cleaned up out of the rock. So we carried this one down very carefully using some straps to get it down the hill. So it took 4 or 5 people like an hour to basically carefully get it down the hill. But then we still had to get it all the way back to camp. So if you look in the very distance of the picture where Derek is walking away, you can see little orange and yellow tents, and that's where we had to carry it back to across the flat part of the ground. Thankfully, Derek's suitcase also works as a backpack. So we basically dumped all of his stuff out of it and then put this big rock in, all strapped in. And then Derek, Tom, and I took turns carrying it like 10 feet, 20 feet, and then taking a rest and putting it on another person. And it took us about an hour just to walk over to those tents, doing this very slowly and carefully. So that's one of the challenges about fossils, is that they're usually really heavy. And I spend a lot of my winters sitting at a desk and then have to go and carry super heavy rocks around. So it keeps us very on our toes on how to do this safely and without getting anyone hurt. So that's where we spend a lot of our time, was on these big, big hills. So this gray cliff that you see, that was the hill that we were walking on. The boulders look so tiny when we're up at the very top of the hill, but then so big when you're standing down there among them. And we found lots of really great fossils that way. When we went in 2022, we found about 15 fossils that we were able to collect from those boulder cliffs. And when we went this year, we probably collected a little bit more than that, maybe like 20 or so bones from the boulders. But it's really hard, slow work to cut them out of those rocks that way. But it's all worth it because we basically have no fossils from there if we weren't doing this work. So it's all really good. But while we were on this trip, we also wanted to hike up to the very top of the mountain, which is where I'm standing and looking from right now. And our tents are way down below. And we wanted to take a look and see what it was like right at the very top, because it looked a little bit different from the boulder cliffs when we were down from below. And so this is what it looks like from the very, very top. You can see there's this big flat area because it's a plateau, and I'm standing, I'll show you what it looks like from the other view. I was basically standing on this little pyramid here. And you can see that this looks really different from the boulder cliffs I was showing you. Instead of there being big chunky boulders, there's mostly these little flat rocks and then lots of sand and mud sort of sitting around on the surface. So this was really different. We were very curious as we walked up to this hill what we might find. And so the first day that I walked up there with Emily and Tom, Tom looked down and was like, oh, there's a little bone fragment here. And then Emily looked down and said, there's a little bone fragment here too. And then I looked down and saw one. So then we knew that we had found something pretty special, because unlike the bones in the boulders, these ones are just sitting on the surface. They had obviously eroded out of that pyramidal hill and washed and collected on the surface. And we basically just started finding all kinds of really cool fossils just sitting there ready for us to pick up. So Emily is holding a foot bone from a small meat-eating dinosaur. I'm holding pieces of another tyrannosaur tooth, which I was pretty excited about. They have this really pretty blue color up on the hill, which is really neat. Here's an example of Tom being very surprised and excited by a leg bone just sitting on one of these sandstone rocks. That's where it had rolled and fell, and that was pretty funny. Because it's very hollow inside, we know that this is from a meat-eating dinosaur because they have hollow bones. And so this might be a shin bone or another leg bone piece from a small meat eater. So that's pretty exciting. I was also excited to find lots of fossils. Teague is holding a really tiny bone that's actually a claw from a small meat-eating dinosaur. So that's also pretty exciting. So this was a lot of small bones that we were finding here for the most part. So instead of having to cut up the rocks using a big rock saw and the heavy chisels, we spent 3 days basically just sitting on our bums or crawling around on our knees with a Ziploc bag and picking up every little piece of bone fragment that we could find. And just trying to collect everything that we could see in case they were new and interesting dinosaur fossils there. This is what it looks like for us to be doing that work instead of using the big cool machines. So there's Tom bending over and picking something up, and I guess it wasn't anything because he put it back on the ground. Derek and Teague are over there picking up little rocks. Sometimes it's hard to tell the pebbles from the bone fragments, so we have to pick them up and look at them really closely. Brady's got a bag with a whole bunch of fossils on the go in there. It looks like he found something. And then Emily's checking something out closely and seeing if there's anything to be collected there. So this is a pretty cool spot. A couple days it wasn't really nice weather and it was a little bit chilly and tricky to just be sitting on the ground, but we were so excited about the fossils that we didn't really mind. And then at the end of the days, of course, we have to bring all of those fossils back to camp. And even if they're just small fossils, we still have to carry them all the way back. Going up to the site at the top of the mountain, which we nicknamed Cloud City because it was usually in the clouds, usually took us about 2 hours to go up or 2 hours to come down. So it's a pretty long walk because we have to go up and down a whole lot. At the end of the day, we would sit and we would sort all of the fossils. Every single fossil gets its own special number and it gets written down on a label and it goes into our notebooks so we can keep track of everything. And then we also have to weigh everything because everything has to go back on the helicopter. So Derek very smartly brought a luggage scale and we would have to weigh our bins of fossils. That bin of all those little fossils weighed about 80 pounds. So we have to make sure everything can actually go in the helicopter with us, which is very exciting, and trying to figure all of that out is a lot of fun and kind of stressful, but very exciting. And this can take a long time. Some evenings we would be working for an hour or 2 or 3 after dinner, just trying to get everything sorted out. By the time we were finished collecting at Cloud City and along the hills, we came back with over 90 dinosaur bones this time. So that's a big increase compared to last time when we came back with about 15. So it was really exciting and really, really productive for us to do that. So based on where we are in the world and in the geologic timescale, we think that we are working in rocks that are from about 68 to 66 million years ago. And so elsewhere in North America, this is T-Rex and Triceratops time. So if we were over the border in Alberta or Montana, we would see big dinosaurs like T-Rex, Triceratops, Ankylosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, all kinds of interesting dinosaurs are really, really well known from just on the other side of the mountains in North America. But we have no idea exactly what to expect here. So I wanted to take a second and talk about some of the dinosaurs that we think we have based on what we found. And then I'm going to show a few using our special object camera over here. So we know that we've got teeth from a big tyrannosaur, which could be T-Rex or could be a cousin. We have shells from a turtle. We have teeth from a horned dinosaur like Triceratops, and we have lots of big plant-eating dinosaur bones that could be from that ceratopsian or could be from a duck-billed hadrosaur dinosaur. And what we're really excited about are all those little foot bones from a small meat eater. We have to really figure out what that meat eater is because it's really cool. They're very rare in North America, but we think they could be something like an oviraptorosaur, which is this one with the long neck and the funny looking head. Or it could be from a dromaeosaur or a raptor dinosaur like Velociraptor, or at this time it would be an animal like a Chiroptera. So we're pretty excited to figure out what that one is, and you'll have to stay tuned. This is the part that takes a really long time to figure out. So I'm going to get away from my camera here, and we're going to switch over to the other camera so that I can show you some of my stuff. All right, let's do this. All right, so you guys are going to see the virtual camera show up here. Let's see if it'll work. Can you guys see a camera going on here? Let me put something under here.
Not just yet,
like it's
Victoria.
working. Okay,
I don't know why it's not working, but it's not working just yet.
Not working just yet. Okay, let me try one more time. We'll switch it back to this.
Fingers crossed.
Wait, I did the wrong one. Here we go. That's why it wasn't working. One day I'll get the hang of technology. All right.
We're good. There we are.
Okay, everybody. So these are some of the dinosaur bones that we found. These are some examples of big rib bone chunks. So here's my finger for comparison. And I just wanted to show a couple cool ones that I thought were really neat. We're just going to do it kind of fast here, just as a little slice. These are really big ones. These big circular chunky bones are vertebrae or backbones from that big plant-eating dinosaur. You can see the very spongy texture inside. That's what helps us know that it's bone instead of just a rock. But sometimes it's hard to tell. Sometimes the rocks do trick us. I wanted to show the Tyrannosaur tooth that I showed in the photo. So here it is in a little tray back at the museum. And so it's very shiny and blue. And this is that Tyrannosaur tooth that I found that I was pretty excited about. And here are examples of chunks of the leg bones from that little dinosaur. So this might be the end of a metatarsal or a foot bone, or could maybe be part of a shin bone. We have to go and compare it with other bones and get it all cleaned up. And then there's lots of other little fragments in here that we need to figure out and see if they all go back together with it. And I'm going to show a really teeny tiny one. Here's a really teeny tiny thing that you're only going to be able to see as a little tiny dot. But that little tiny dot is the tooth from the big horned dinosaur. So even though Triceratops is like the size of an elephant, their teeth, when we find them, are super, super tiny. So that's just a little example of some of the things that we found. I'm going to put this back on my camera so you guys can see me. And then I'll share my screen again one more time. All right, there's me. And let's bring it back to my presentation. Yeah, so we're pretty excited. This is a really exciting thing for us to have found. Like I said, we've got a really big diversity of dinosaurs now that we had no idea about even just a few years ago. And we're learning more and more every time that we go. So now the long process of cleaning up the bones, gluing little pieces back together and comparing them to fossils in other museums that other paleontologists have worked on will begin. And we'll also be doing things like working with geologists to help us figure out how old the rocks are and what kind of environment it was that the dinosaurs were living in. So we're interested in both the biology of the dinosaurs and the geology of their environment all at the same time. That's one of the fun things about being a paleontologist, is you get to think about all these different sciences at the same time. This was the morning of our very last day, and that pretty much brings me to the end of the presentation. It's a really beautiful place, a very special place to get to go work, and I'm really grateful that I get to go there. If you'd like to learn more about some of this work, you can visit our learning portal and learn a bit more about some of the dinosaurs that we've found in other places in northern BC that are like the Spatsizi Plateau. And you can also book a digital field trip with the museum if you're interested in hearing more about some of the projects that are going on here at the museum. So thanks very much for joining us. And I guess we'll take some questions now. I'll get my screen off so that you can take a look and see me here.
Well, Victoria, thank you so much for that. We're going to dive in with our Kahoot in just a second first. But before we do dive in with the Kahoot and all our questions, I just wanted to see if you could identify this dinosaur.
Oh my gosh.
Come back into the broadcast because it's something
that looks a lot like a Tyrannosaur, but can you see the denticles and serrations on the teeth?
I don't know. They look pretty flat to me. Anyway, well,
how many fingers are on the hand of that dinosaur?
Yeah, 5 on my hand. I don't know.
Oh, that's really weird for a dinosaur.
That's really odd, isn't it? Well, we're going to dive in with the Kahoot, like I said. So for those who are new to Kahoot, the faster you answer, the more points you get. And what you win is Victoria and I's everlasting respect. So I'm going to cue this up. It's 4 quick questions to test your understanding and have a little bit of fun. And I made this one extra tricky, Victoria. So if you want to help us out with little hints when there's a few seconds to go in each one, that would probably be very fantastic for our kids today. So there's 34 of you already in. Let's do this thing, and we will get underway. Here we go, folks. All right. 3, 2, 1. Our countdown begins. All right. Question 1. People have been around for about 300,000 years. How long did dinosaurs rule the Earth? Is it also 300,000 years? Is it 1,000,000 years? Is it 18 million years? Or is it over 180 million years? How long were dinosaurs around? Victoria, any clues for us with 5 seconds to go?
Well, I'll give you a clue that there's more time between us and T-Rex than T-Rex and Stegosaurus.
It's one of my favorite facts in all of science, and thank you so much for phrasing it that way. Most of our audience, you guys nailed this one, over 180 million years, which is crazy. So Purple Lizard takes our lead as we go into question 2. We didn't cover any of these explicitly. I just wanted to reinforce some really cool dino concepts. All right, birds are dinosaurs, true or false? Victoria, any thoughts as we have answers pouring in?
Well, we talked about how dinosaurs have hollow bones, and birds also have hollow bones, which I think is a very interesting fact. So I'll leave that with you guys.
Yes. Well, we've got 53 answers in. Oh, a lot of our folks know this. I would say if you asked this question 15 years ago, you'd have exactly the opposite ratio, if not everybody saying false. So this is something that, like, when I was a kid, we were just barely talking about this, and now most of you know it, which is very,
now
very
it's
good.
really normal to see feathery dinosaurs around.
There's so many now. It's such an exciting time to be a paleontologist. All right. Which of these can we find as fossils? And it's more than one correct answer. It might be all 4. It might be 2. Can we find full body skeletons? Can we find footprints? Can we find fossil poo? Or can we find dino DNA encrusted in mosquitoes trapped in amber like Jurassic Park? What do we think? We really trip people up with this one. So, okay. So skeletons, yes. Footprints, yes. Poo, yes. But unfortunately for the 15 of you, we cannot get dino DNA from mosquitoes, which is one of the great sadnesses in the world ever, I think.
It's true.
Yeah. We wanted there to be dino DNA in mosquitoes, but alas, not meant to be, because dinos are really old. Like the 66 million years ago, the sort of meteorite wiped out the dinosaurs, and DNA doesn't last that long, does it?
No, DNA breaks down really quickly. We can find dinosaur protein, so the stuff that DNA makes, things like the collagen and keratin in your hair and fingernails, we can find that. But so far, DNA, we haven't been able to find.
I would say when I found out that we found collagen from dinosaurs, I was about the age of our kids in today's classroom. It was like one of the coolest discoveries of all time. So very, very cool. Now, this is a tricky one. Victoria hinted at this a little bit. BC is a hotbed for dinosaur discoveries, where most of the coolest fossils ever that have been found there. Is that true or false? You're talking.
I'm a little biased here. I'm curious to see what everyone says.
I'm not throwing BC under the bus with this answer. I would say, we really tripped him up. BC is amazing. It's incredible, and we're discovering all these incredible new things there. But classically, I remember when I was a kid, I was told that, like, dinosaur fossils in Canada were in Alberta, and in the US, they were in Montana. And increasingly, we're finding more places around the world that have done the dinosaur fossils, but we're beginning that exploration now. These are not places that have been like hotbeds where people have been going in huge droves for 100 years. But
that's true. Yeah. It's been like, so I've been working here. There's been a team in Tumbler Ridge working on finding dinosaurs. But it's hard. We have to go up into the mountains or along rivers. We don't really have the same kind of badland environments that you tend to think of as dinosaurs. So we're going to get there. But so far, we don't have quite as many fossils as Alberta has.
And I like this because this means for you kids that might be interested in dinosaurs, you can go out and be part of Victoria's team. You can start your own team. You can go explore places that people haven't been looking for hundreds of years and find completely new discoveries, which means that the science is still out there for you to discover, which is very, very cool. So thanks for playing along, and Brave Cheetah, kudos to you. Let us know who you are in the chat. Victoria, there's so many. There's 400 kids, so we're going to do as many questions as we can. Okay. We're going to do all our live classes. Miss Fisher's class will come to you guys in just a second. So if you want to flick on your mic, great. But Miss Coburn in your virtual school, we're going to head to you guys at Dalewood if you want to kick us off with a query. Hey, guys.
Hello, everybody. We have several students here. So I need all the students to turn their mics off except for Alexis. Alexis is going to ask you a question.
What is the largest fossil that you have discovered, and where was it found? Can you share that with us?
The largest fossil that I've discovered? Ooh, great question. I have been in some places where we have skeletons of horned dinosaurs, a dinosaur called Pachyrhinosaurus, and their heads are really big, and they have this big blob of bone on their nose. So instead of a horn like Triceratops, they have a big boss of bone. So those are probably some of the biggest single fossils that I've helped excavate. We had a skull that was like 600 or 700 pounds. I've helped dig up some sauropod bones. Those were pretty big. The biggest fossil I've ever worked on that I didn't help dig up was the ankylosaur skeleton named Zool.
Yes.
And that belly weighed 30,000 pounds when they dug it out of the ground. So I didn't help excavate that one, but I did help study it, and it was very cool. So those are some of the big things that I've helped dig up.
It's a beautiful answer, and I really want every kid, when you're done this program, go look up Zool, because that was like, when I used to be in Toronto, Victoria's like big thing, the Royal Ontario Museum at the time had this incredible like thing on Zool. Zool is awesome. Everyone should check it out. It's so cool. If you did nothing else, that would be an amazing thing to do in a career, and you just keep finding out epic new discoveries. So I can't wait for
it. It was a pretty cool dinosaur to work on.
It's a pretty amazing find, yes. Miss Fisher's class, Carsonville, Michigan, we're coming to you. Miss Martin, we're coming to you guys next, but come on in, grade 2s, take us away.
I wanted to know, how long have you been working there?
Yes. How long have I been working? Okay, so I've moved out to British Columbia in 2018 to work at the Royal BC Museum, and I've gone up to Spatsizi Plateau 3 times. So I've spent about 25 to 30 days there so far, spread over a couple of summers.
Very, very cool. And how long have you been a paleontologist in general, Victoria, just to sort of cover that for anyone who might...
I've been a paleontologist since I was 3 years old, and I liked dinosaurs. But I guess that in terms of being like a paleontologist where I'm getting paid to do that, probably about like 10 years. But really, once you start going to university and studying, you're kind of like being a paleontologist too.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned 3, because I will say, having worked with scientists of all stripes around the world, I think everyone at 3 starts out and they're super keen to be paleontologists, and like 99% of us are foolish and go on to other careers. And some people, like Dr. Victoria, are just like, yes, dinosaurs forever. And it's the best gig in the world. Miss Martin's class, we're going to head to Redcliffe. Come on in, guys, and take us away. Hey.
Hi.
How do you know what the dinosaurs look like from the bones?
Yes, great question.
Oh, I didn't hear the question. Can you repeat it for me?
Yeah. Sorry. How do you know what the dinosaurs look like from the bones? You're showing us these rocks.
Oh, what a great question. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so it basically comes from me having to gone to school for a super duper long time. So by the time I graduated from university, I was in grade like 23. And so a lot of what we did was learn how to identify the bones in a skeleton, and then how to learn how they look different between different types of dinosaurs. And so I know a lot about some groups of dinosaurs, and I know less about others. So I actually don't know as much about meat-eating dinosaurs. I usually work more on plant-eating dinosaurs. And we basically look at the shapes and the textures, and then we compare with pictures in research papers that other paleontologists have published, or sometimes I go to other museums and I study the bones in their collections and compare. And even from little pieces, sometimes you can tell what kind of dinosaur you have. Sometimes you can't, but sometimes you can.
That's a beautiful answer, and I really like that you highlighted that it was a lot of schooling to get there. And I know it sounds kind of daunting. You're in grade 3 today, some of you, and like the thought of going through like decades after that sounds crazy, but and you'll attest to this, like you get to work with the coolest people that are every bit as passionate about your favorite thing in the world as you are. And you get to go to really cool places, and you get to make new discoveries that no one's ever found before. So you get like one of the coolest jobs in the world, and you get to play for work for the rest of your life. You just got to go for school for a long time to get there. So it's worth noting, everybody. All right, live class, I'm coming back to you all in just a second. Westview School, we're coming to you. We might go a little long today because we're rebels, and please do email me all your extra dino questions by the end of this. We'll try and take more writing after the fact. But YouTube, really quick, Cookie wants to know, what's the fossil behind you or skeleton behind you on that shelf?
Oh, what a great question. That is the skull of a bighorn sheep.
Ooh, is this something that you run into in the mountains of BC?
Yeah, so not so much in Spatsizi Plateau. I've seen them in like the Rocky Mountains, especially when I lived in Alberta. I went to Jasper National Park. I have seen mountain goats, which are a different type of animal when we've been in Spatsizi Plateau, but the big animal we see most of the time is caribou.
Very, very cool. Thank you for that. I originally, when I saw it, I was like saber-toothed cat when I saw the question. And
it does look like the opposite. Yeah, that's the horn right there. Yeah.
So funny. Miss Robinson's class, they're in Trenton, and they want to know, can you only find dinosaur fossils in BC, or are there other things to discover as well?
Oh, what a great question. So actually, dinosaurs are just a really small part of BC's fossil record. They're maybe not even the most important thing that we find here. We actually have over 500 million years of the fossil record preserved in BC. Our most famous and probably most important fossils are the Burgess Shale. So the fossils of the very earliest organisms that eventually sort of go off and become all the things that we see around us today. We have fossils from after the dinosaurs, so things like insects and fish and plants from lots of ancient lakes in the middle of BC. We have marine reptiles that are a little bit older than the dinosaurs I'm working on from the Triassic period, so big things like ichthyosaurs. And we have elasmosaurs and mosasaurs, all those good things. What else do we have? Almost anything that you can think of. We have mammoths and mastodons and like all kinds of cool ice age animals. It's an amazing place to be a paleontologist.
It really is. And I want to stress with my dinosaur question in the hoot too. Like, that's what I thought of when I thought of BC fossils. Burgess Shale, which is like mind-blowing, and everyone should look up the Burgess Shale too, because it's so cool. Dinosaurs wasn't on my radar. So the fact that Victoria is making all these amazing discoveries is what makes it so cool. Again, there's so many discoveries out there. I love that question, guys. All right, we're going to do 3 more together. I wish we could go all day, but email us extra and we'll see what we can do. Westview School, we're heading to Alberta first. Come on in, Miss Smith's class, and take us away. Hey. Hi.
How many bones are in one dinosaur's body?
Yes, great
Oh my
question.
gosh, how many bones are in one dinosaur's body? A lot. I actually don't know the number off the top of my head, but it would be like over 100 and maybe even more depending on the type of dinosaur. So of course, there's all your ribs, all your vertebrae. Some dinosaurs have really long necks and tails, so that adds extra backbones and neck bones and tailbones to the count. And then the dinosaurs I like the most, the armored dinosaurs called ankylosaurs, all of those spikes and plates on their back are also bones. And they usually have tons and tons of little tiny bones in between those big spikes. So I made an estimate one time that Zool might have had over 10,000 of those ossicles on its body. So that's very extreme, but yeah, so it can vary a lot, but it's definitely like hundreds of bones in a body.
So we haven't got the chance to talk about this that much today because we've done it in some other talks. And today we're focusing on BC, but everyone look up ankylosaurs, because when I met Victoria, I was all toothy predator. I was T-Rex, I was Velociraptor, that was my favorite. And she is the biggest advocate in the world for ankylosaurs, and she's won me over. Like, over the years, I now see them. Every time I see a fossil, I'm like, oh yeah, Victoria studies those. They're so cool. And they really are some of the neatest dinosaurs ever.
Cool dinosaurs.
Yeah. Mr. Hancock, we're going to head to Georgetown, and then Miss Baraz will wrap up with you in California in just a second. Come on in. Take us away in Ontario. Hey.
Perfect. I'm only going to ask one question, but one of our students we're all pretty amazed that you get to walk around and just find fossils. One of my students was wondering, how deep have you been digging? How far down have you been going?
Oh, what a great question. So in this particular spot, we don't actually dig really deep into the ground. At the very top of the mountain, we didn't dig at all. We basically just picked things up off the surface. We were trying to figure out where on that big pyramid the fossils were actually coming out of. So we dug a little bit into the hill, but we couldn't quite figure it out on this trip. So that might be something we do in the future. And the rest of the time they were in those boulders. In other places, we usually don't necessarily dig down really deep unless we know there's a dinosaur fossil there. And then what we do is we usually try to dig all around the fossil, and then at least twice as deep as the fossil is tall in the ground in order to get it out without breaking it. So it can really vary. Sometimes if the bone is going into a big steep hill, we have to dig down until we're at that level. So it varies a whole lot. But on Spatsizi Plateau, we're not really digging. We're mostly cutting and thwacking, for lack of a better word.
Thwacking, our science term du jour. We've actually never had that question. We've had a few questions we've never had in a dinosaur program ever. You guys are an amazing audience today. So thank you very much for that. I didn't know that either. Guys, I wish we could take 100 more questions live. I know some of you are heading off to lunch, another period soon, so we'll wrap up with Ms. Barajas' class, and then we'll bring everyone in for a big thank you and farewell. Stay tuned for a really long email, lots of extra dino stuff to keep the learning going, and write down those extra questions and get them to us, okay? Ms. Barajas, Oxnard, come on in and wrap us up. Hey, guys. Hi.
What is the smallest dinosaur you have ever discovered?
Ooh, the smallest dinosaur I've ever discovered might be that small meat eater that we found this year. It's not very big. My guess is if all those bones are from one individual animal, that's probably about the size of a wolf. So that's a pretty small dinosaur. That would be one of the smallest ones I've found.
It's really funny to think that a small dinosaur is the size of a wolf when, like, if I was walking out in the woods somewhere, I'd be like, wow, that's a tremendously large animal. Holy geez. Dinosaurs are really like next level scale. Like these things are,
True.
as you said, size
And
of
it's also
elephant.
it's harder to find small bones. They get broken up and destroyed more easily, and they're just harder to spot on the ground. So there's a real bias against small dinosaurs when we're finding them and in the fossil record. So it's a real challenge to find small dinosaurs.
I want to harp on this for just 2 seconds before I bring in our kids, because if you go around the earth today, there are over 2 million species of animal, like 2 million different kinds of creature out there, at least. How many types of dinosaur have we found ever? Is it a few thousand ever? That's it?
Yeah, I think it's about 2,000 dinosaurs that we know of right now.
Over 180 million years. So there were millions of kinds of dinosaur. We just haven't found them yet, which means that there are so many more discoveries to be made. And it's one of the coolest things about paleontology is that we really are finding entirely new species, entirely new ecosystems every time we look. And it's what makes this job so, so special. So, man, I hate ending these broadcasts. Before we wrap up and bring everyone in, is there any final message you want to leave us about the museum, about your work in BC, about paleontology, something to say farewell with?
I guess I'll just say thanks for listening and being part of this journey. You're hearing really about the beginning of this story. So I hope that you'll sort of tune in the future and see what updates we have as we actually start to figure out what these dinosaurs were and what it means for fossils in BC. So thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. And classes, if you take the chance to fill out a quick little survey at the end and you want to see Victoria again, send a message about that. We'd love to have her back, and we certainly will soon. But what we do to wrap up every broadcast, the whole Royal BC Museum team, I'm going to bring in all our classes to say thank you and farewell. So Miss Fisher, Miss Fuller, Miss Martin, Miss Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.